Show. Like full screen over there. Choose. Zoom. Share screen. Desktop 2. Share. All right, you should see the title slide. I did everything.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, looks
Okay.
good.
Away we go. Phew.
Yeah, got it.
Welcome to Wednesday Night Slides number 42. As I said earlier, this is going to be stuff that I shot just in the past 20 days or so, a few trips, and we're going to kick things off by going to Port Clinton, Pennsylvania. Reading Northern was running Reading T1 2102 over the July 4th weekend, and Mike Burkhart made arrangements for him and John Regan and I to access the Port Clinton property the night before the excursion. They had the T1 sitting out waiting for us. Usually it's back in a little bit further in the shop, but they had the cab out and was sitting there with switcher 802, which was going to come into play the next morning, as we discovered. But anyhow, we found the hostler, talked to him. He said, yeah, if you got permission to be here, have at it. So we did. So we did several night shots for 2102. And the hostler turned on the headlight for us. His name was Rich, and he even posed in a few of the scenes for us. I've said in previous shows that the Reading T1s are probably my favorite engines. It was the sister locomotive 2102, the 2124, that got me first interested in trains when Dad took me on the Iron Horse rambles back in the 1960s. Rode behind 2124, 2100, and I believe we rode behind 2102 back then as well. Changed up the lighting a little bit to get some shadows going. And then I also thought this would be a cool black and white. As always, I invite questions and comments during the show. If you have a question or comment, feel free to jump in. Just hit your space bar to unmute yourself. Ask your question, make your comment. Happy to oblige.
What kind of lighting setup did you use for these?
This is using 4 Alien B strobes. We finished up at about 11 o'clock, and because we wanted to be back down to the engine house at a little past 5, we didn't bother with a motel because there's no point. So after crashing in the Port Clinton parking lot overnight, we were back down with the engine first thing in the morning as before sunrise, which wasn't much of a sunrise because it was cloudy. You see their other steam engine, Pacific 425, the 4 1/4. Back there in stall number 2. And the railroad's really good about this. People can wander in before they leave in the morning. The passenger consist is about 10 miles, 14 miles south down in North Reading. The locomotive backs down to there prior to the trip to couple onto the consist and the way it goes. But the railroad allows photographers back in here in the Port Clinton area to photograph the preparations. Now, when the train ran in June, I saw some excellent photos from photographers like Dennis Livesey when the engine first started up out of the engine house, this magnificent plume of steam as it came across the turntable. Unfortunately, the reason that the 802 was sitting there was this time they decided to tow the engine across the turntable. So we didn't get the same spectacular steam show that the folks did back in June. Here it is, back on the main line now, backing down. It'll back the 14 miles down to North Reading to pick up the passenger consist. Some people say Reading T1s are ugly locomotives, but they're mighty fine in my book, I'll tell you. Okay, here we are. We're in Leesport. The train engine's gone down, got its passenger consist, and here it comes up through Leesport with the excursion. The excursion ran from North Reading to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. Our first shot was here in West Leesport, next to the old mill. Got a little bit of sun in here, much to our surprise. We actually got ahead of it before it made its, it makes a station stop in Port Clinton to pick up more passengers. And we actually got ahead of it just before Port Clinton. So we got a bonus shot here. And I had plotted out 5 or 6 locations that I wanted to get beforehand. The whole chase going out was pretty much choreographed. So this was actually a bonus shot here for me. The first shot, or the second shot I really wanted after West Leesport was going by this pond here. If you look carefully in front of the first driver, you'll see a small tree there. There's a set of trees there that were just planted. And this shot is going to gradually go away as those trees grow. Once again, though, we got sun here, so this shot is off my hit list now. I've got it in the bag. I don't need to do it again. Now we're near Barnesville at the 102 signal. I could have done without the car parked in the background, but when the Reading and Northern upgraded the main lines, this is all ex-Reading trackage. They put signals back in again. And they put in searchlight signals, really, really, really cool, because searchlight signals on the regular railroads are getting fewer and far between all the time. From there was a quick hop across the mountain to the train makes a huge loop at East Monomoy Junction. It makes about a 5 or 6 mile loop, and from where we were at the 102 signal over to this shot here, by car is only about 3 miles. So we easily beat it here. This was the location I had done on the previous chase back in June. I did a slightly different angle this time. Once again, this was a bonus shot. One I hadn't planned on, but the timing was just worked out to get it. The next shot on my hit list was the tunnel, and I put that in quotes, the tunnel at Nesquehoning. It's actually a highway overpass. If you look carefully, you can see the guardrail for the highway through the trees, a little gap of the trees in the top of the frame. From here, the train went into Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe's only another 3 miles in front of the locomotive here. And we knew Jim Thorpe was going to be a zoo. So we went to a different plan. We headed over to Lansford and visited the number 9 coal mine. You ride this little train down into the coal mine. That's our locomotive there with our engineer on it. We're riding in the first car coupled up to the locomotive here, going down into the mine. It's dark down here. This is all like ISO 10,000 shots here, using what little light there is from the lights along the walls of the mine here. There's our little train. There's our locomotive. We're riding in the first car. This is the station, about a 1/4 mile down inside the anthracite mine. Here's some of the railroad. The railroad initially ran on overhead catenary. Of course, when you got a ceiling this low and you're bringing tourists in, you really don't want live wire 6 feet off the ground, 7 feet maybe. But so it's all I think it's all battery now. This battery locomotive. After you get off the train actually leaves, goes back up to the outside the mine to get the next load of passengers. You spend about an hour underground. And after our tour underground was over, here we are coming back up to the station again in time for the next load of passengers coming in. Once they detrain, well, we'll get back on again and ride back out of the mine. And here we are back on the train again. And coming out of the mine, here we are back in daylight. And there's our engineer, our locomotive. So with that out of the way, it's back over to the T1 coming out of Jim Thorpe after its 3-hour layover there. We're in Nescahoning here as it's coming through the big curve there. This is a pretty popular spot for photographers because there's a couple of really nice churches in the background here. You can see the steeple of one church, the white one there, just to the left of the smoke. The cabbage top steeple, you can barely see it right next to the smoke in the background there. From there, it was off to Tamaqua. He comes flying through Tamaqua, puts on a real show. You can see the brake smoke coming out from under the coaches there. And then our final shot was at the Peacock Locks Trestle between Port Clinton and North Reading. This is actually on private property. But the property owner here is really, really friendly. Knock on the door, ask permission, and he's more than happy to let you back into his backyard to get this shot.
Hey, Steve, quick question. Is this all Reading Northern trackage or do they share it with Norfolk Southern?
No, it's already in the Northern.
That's what I wanted to know. You heard?
Okay. Now comes the bizarre part. Last weekend, I went out to Windber, Pennsylvania, which is not far from Johnstown, to do a tour of what they call, it's a tour sponsored by Abandon America, abandonamerica.us on the web. And they do tours of different things, abandoned churches, all kinds of abandoned stuff. But one of their most popular tours is the, quote, trolley graveyard tour. There's a group of trolleys up in Windber, a private collection the guy put together, which has since fallen into disrepair. And it's a pretty eerie place. What you're looking at here are the letters RTA upside down on an upside down PCC streetcar. RTA being making it a Cleveland car. In front of the shop building, there are a handful of PCCs that have been used for parts sources for various things. And we get there and we shoot some of the PCCs out front. Boston MBTA, the T. An operator's seat in one of the PCCs. And for those not familiar with PCCs, PCC stands for President's Conference Committee. And what that was as it states, a committee of all the streetcar presidents back in the 1930s. They got together and to fight the expense of running streetcars in the age of automobiles coming on, to cut costs, they got together and agreed on one mass-produced streetcar design. It's a timeless design, the PCC streetcar. You'll see a little better view of them here a little bit later on. And PCCs were the dominant streetcars from the 1940s until most cities abandoned the streetcar service. This is not a PCC. I'm not sure whose car this is. I couldn't find any markings on it. This is inside a barn. And inside the barn are just a handful of streetcars. These were in pretty good shape 2 years ago, from what I've been told. But unfortunately, vandals have broke into the barn and did a lot of damage to the cars inside here. The owner has since moved to St. Louis. He's no longer even on the property. And the only way to access this legally is through the tours offered by Abandon America. This is inside the barn. You got a Boston PCC car on the left. On the right, the white and red is a SEPTA PCC. And then in the back, the orange car is an older car from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. There's the SEPTA PCC with the Johnstown car. And Boston PCC. And the Johnstown car a little bit closer up. The Boston car still has its roll sign in it. This was a Boston PCC. It's right next to the door to get into the shop. Apparently, because it's so close to the door, it was easy access for some taggers. Now we're getting into the back lot. This is where things get interesting. In addition to PCC cars, there's a group of these ex-Chicago Transit Authority cars that SEPTA acquired to use on the Norristown High Speed Line for a couple of years. From the Norristown High Speed Line, they wound up here in Windber. Unfortunately, there's no real way to secure this site. And it's fairly easy access for graffiti vandals if they know where to park and how to get down in there off the hillside behind these cars. This is the only other non-PCC in the back lot that I found, other than the Chicago L cars. This is an ex-Red Arrow car, a streamliner that used to run on the Media and Sharon Hill lines. This is the only non-PCC I saw in the back lot other than the L cars. And here's the woods, the lineup of the PCCs going back into the woods. This is the front of that media car, the streamliner, car number 20. I went back through my photos that I took of these cars. I only got a few of them in service. I never did shoot the 20 in regular service that I can tell. You got the Chicago L cars there on the right-hand edge of the frame. So I'm with a bunch of decidedly non-rail fans. This is a photography general photography group, advanced photographers. A lot of them were shooting infrared and stuff like that, but no idea of what they were looking at other than it looks cool and abandoned and stuff. Their specialty, this group's specialty is, like I said, is abandoned stuff. So I had to keep biting my tongue because a lot of them kept calling these things buses. I'm like, no, they're not buses, they're streetcars, but I refrained from freaking out over it.
Hey, Steve, where is this again? I'm sorry.
Where is this? It's in Windber, Pennsylvania, which is not far from Johnstown.
Ah, okay. So that's quite a distance then.
Yeah, these were acquired by a private individual when the cities and the cities that are here are Boston, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. PCCs are all present here. He picked up a lot of these streetcars as the systems were phasing out PCCs. His idea was he would accumulate streetcars, and then as places like San Francisco developed historic streetcar routes, or as museums wanted to acquire PCCs for their collection, he would then flip these cars and sell them back. That plan never materialized.
Thank you for the explanation, because I was wondering, you look at this stuff and then you really wonder, were they bought for scrap to begin with, or because that's all they are now?
They were bought, yeah, they were bought as fully functional streetcars, unfortunately.
Wow. Jeez, that's just unbelievable.
Here's a Pittsburgh PCC. You barely see the PA Transit on the front there.
How many were in the collection?
Probably 3 dozen or so. This star is actually part of the car's original paint scheme that it had. This is one of the Philadelphia bicentennial PCCs. Philadelphia painted a bunch of PCCs in red, white, and blue, and gave them the names of the states back in 1976 during the bicentennial. And apparently there's 3 or 4 or 5 bicentennial cars back in here. But unfortunately, with all the graffiti on these cars now, this was the only car I could identify positively as being one of the bicentennial cars. Pittsburgh was a wild place for watching PCCs in the 1980s. They sold entire cars for advertising. You had the Clark Bar car, you had the Pittsburgh Steelers car, all kind of really cool advertising cars. This car here was the Burger King car. And the only way I could tell it was the Burger King car is because Home of the Whopper is still showing through here under the graffiti. And that was the only car here that I could positively identify as being one of the Pittsburgh advertising cars.
That was on the trolleyology program last night specifically.
Yes.
All those great advertising cars. It's pretty neat. I would have never known.
The group was about 20 people. Everybody tended to stay out of everybody else's way for the most part. So you get shots like this without other photographers in them. The cars on the left are all leaning. I don't know if they've collapsed on their frames, or if the rail has collapsed underneath of them, or what's going on there. But they're, and I'm not even sure what gauge this is, because the Pittsburgh cars and the Philly cars are within a 1/4 inch gauge of each other, but they're all Pennsylvania broad gauge. Whereas the Boston cars are standard gauge. I'm not sure what Cleveland used. Looking through the doors from one car to another. At one point, there are 3 parallel lines of streetcars back in here.
How many acres is this site?
It's very linear. The property is only, 100 feet wide, because enough to accommodate 3 tracks. There's a steep embankment on one side and a steep hill on the other. So basically, you're looking at one long piece of track going back into the woods. This obviously is a SEPTA car, and the numbers, the 22 are in the font style that would indicate this is one of the bicentennial cars. Now you got a Boston car on the left with a lighthouse painted on it. Fortunately, for the most part, it was overcast this day, because the sun had been out, the shadows would have been really tough to compensate for. But I would take a shot and look at the back of my camera, and I couldn't tell looking at the shot if it was brighter than I thought it was back in here or darker than I thought it was back in here, all on one frame. It's just bizarre lighting. Here we see the sun's out now, and we're getting some filter light down through the trees, actually makes a pretty cool effect. The infrared shooters are really happy to see the sun come out because they were doing all kind of weird things with infrared.
Hey, Steve, how long have these cars been here to the best of your knowledge? I mean, last 40 years or more?
Yeah, 30, 40 years.
Gotcha.
They weren't too badly vandalized initially. Then some vandalism crept in. But then all it took was one person, once you hit the age of the internet, all it took was one person to discover this place and post it to Instagram, and the hordes descended upon it. Every graffiti artist in the country discovered it and came out and did their tagging, and the vandals found it. Based on the geography, I don't know if copper thieves have gotten back in here or not. It would be tough to get the copper out, given the geography. But I don't know what's on these cars that's even remotely usable at this point.
I would think the chairs are salvageable.
The scrap metal price isn't almost worth them recovering either. Scrap metal's really low right now.
Of course, the big question is what's going to happen to all of this. The owner is pretty up there in years, and he's been talking about selling for a few years now. And even if he doesn't decide to sell, at some point he's going to pass away, and he has kids, and the kids are going to get the cash out of the property. Abandon America is doing one more tour in October, and they're not sure if there will be anything available, if there'll be any tours available after that. This one was kind of bizarre. I couldn't figure out what this was. It's a SEPTA car, but on the side of it, it said Trenton, Mercer, and something, and I have no idea where that came from.
At this point, would it be considered an environmental cleanup situation type of thing?
I'm not sure. It's all electrical. I don't think there's any PCBs or anything in these.
Asbestos, maybe.
Asbestos, maybe. No, not much as far as oil contaminants or things like that. So I'm not sure.
You know, the wiring and electrical stuff would be a hazard of some sort.
This is on one of the CTA cars. Back in the barn again. They had an afternoon session and then a night session. I signed up for both. And so in between sessions, there was about an hour and a half. But those who had both sessions could stay on the property. So I went back into the barn again to do some more shots. We got a Boston PCC on the left, that mystery car in the center. And way down there is the SEPTA PCC. Also in the barn, and I didn't shoot it because I didn't know what it was at the time. And now I know, and I wish I shot it. Also in this barn is Lehigh and New England business car, which is behind me at this point. It was real dark up there because there's no windows. And I didn't venture up there to take a look. And I wish I had now. The sun was out. So I did some roster shots, some railfan style roster shots of the stuff out in the front lot, in front of the shop. These cars here have been salvaged for parts. There's the retriever and retriever rope on one of the cars. Cleveland car in front and the Pittsburgh car, the orange car behind it. And a Boston car beyond that. Once again, the RTA, the Cleveland car. cat is crying. He's sad about all the trolleys. And just to prove it's not cat roadkill, here's the cat looking in the doors here. That's the yard cat, kind of friendly, but doesn't want to be touched. But he'll follow everybody around, see what's going on. Because everything is so colorful, I didn't bother with anything. I didn't really see anything that struck me as a black and white image, except for maybe this shot here. So I did, oops. So I did convert that into black and white.
Actually, with the sun coming through the window there, Steve, in color, I think it looks better.
Perhaps the upside down Cleveland car. Now, the person leading the tour, who's not a rail fan, said the reason these cars were being salvaged was because the bolsters were needed by somebody. I'm not sure if that's true or not. The underside of the PCC. And judging by the lettering, this car is actually upside down. Then they did some night stuff. This was I had seen previous results of their tours with the night stuff, and it was kind of intriguing. So I wanted to see how they did this, what they did. And basically, this is just a 4-light setup, 2 lights, one each inside of the cars. One on the side of the Cleveland car off to the right, and one on the nose of the Pittsburgh car off to the left.
Make a great Halloween shot.
Yeah. And for the night stuff, if you had been there before and had your own lights, you were free to go out and do your own thing with any trolley you wanted to. Due to the weed situation, as I was saying before the program, there hadn't many tours back in here for a couple of years. And the path from the shop to the back lot was really, 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 really badly grown in. Was not a good path anywhere. They've done night stuff in the back lot before, but this year it was just too treacherous in the dark to go back there. But if you had your own lights and you've been here before, you were free to go off and do whatever you want to do on your own. I stuck with the main group since it was my first time doing this, just to see how they did it and what they did and how it went. Now, these cars here aren't all that far away from where you park your car. And if I were to do this again, I'm not sure if I would or not, but if I were to do this again, I would bring a few of my strobes. And once the group moved off from these cars to do other things, I would do my own thing with these cars here. One guy who had gone off on his own was using color lights to light things up. And I kind of hung around for a few minutes while he did his thing and stole some of his light for this shot here. This was also one of his shots. A clear, a white light on the nose. He had blue light inside of the car.
You were all handheld with ISO, Steve?
No, everything I shot here at night was off of a tripod. Off of your tripod, actually, Doug.
All right, getting some use.
Yes. And then he moved the blue light out to the front. And this is what it looked like. It was really bizarre. So the night session wound down at about 11:15, 11:30. once again, I was not in the mood to spend $100 on a motel for just a few hours of sleep. So I headed up to Crescent and found a spot to park by the tracks. And I got there about 12:30 or so. And when I sleep in the car, I like to be good and tired before I go to sleep. So I sat up and watched trains for a while. So I had my sports chair out, watching trains go by. And this train stopped right in front of me, just begging for a photo. So I got out the tripod again and did some photography of this train here, these tank cars sitting here in front of me. And I've made that into a black and white. Here's the train sitting, waiting. He's actually waiting for that red signal on the far right. Another train is going to run around him with the green signal. And here comes the other train. And off he goes, heading towards Horseshoe Curve and Altoona. So at this point here, I looked at the forecast for Sunday, and it was going to be cloudy. So I was just going to drive home. I thought, on the way home, I'll swing by the East Broad Top and see what's going on there and chase the 11 o'clock train. But then I thought, you know what? It's going to be cloudy. And East Broad Top, you can access the tracks from both sides easily everywhere. You can always get a sunny shot of any angle on that railroad, no matter what. On the other hand, down in Cumberland on the Western Maryland Scenic, there are some angles down there that are where that if the sun is out, they're just no good. Well, you know what? Being it's going to be cloudy, I'm going to shoot down to the Western Maryland Scenic and try some of these shots that would only work on a cloudy day. So next morning I got up, headed to Cumberland, and got 1309 coming out of the Ridgely Yard, entering the Cumberland station. 1309 2662 is the largest steam locomotive east of Cheyenne in service in the United States. And I suppose you could call it the largest steam locomotive in regular service in the US, and certainly the largest steam locomotive you can ride behind in the US.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it is the largest operating in regular service in the US.
So it came into the station, and one of my friends, Howard Pincus, was the engineer. And he spotted me and waved. I waved back. So that would come into play a little bit later on. So the first shot I wanted to do was at City Junction, which is actually inside the Cumberland city limits. I knew they had a Chesapeake and Ohio hopper car there. And since this locomotive used to work on the Chesapeake and Ohio, I thought that would make a pretty cool shot. Now, like I said, this is a cloudy day. Had the sun been out, it would have been directly over the locomotive. I'd be looking right into it. So this is where the being here on a cloudy day was worthwhile. And here it is going by that C&O hopper car. From here, I went up to the Parkersville Road overpass. Parkersville Road, it's a straight shot, but there's trees on both sides of the tracks there. And if the sun is out, it's always shadowed in, except for a very narrow window during the day when the train is never there. So I went up to Parkersville Road and set up. And here's where we're always wearing loud Hawaiian shirts comes into play. Howard, who was running the locomotive, spotted me up on the bridge with my Hawaiian shirt and opened up the cylinder cocks and produced some steam for the photo. Very, very, in addition to being bad for sun, it's a very narrow window to shoot with the trees here. It's like room for 3 people, maybe, to get a shot that's not obstructed by trees here. And then from there, I went into Frostburg, into the line of the Western Maryland Scenic, and went to the side of the tracks that is not normally, that's normally in shadow on a sunny day. And the scene I actually wanted was this one here going past the barns. I had done this a month ago with one of their diesels in the evening and liked the shot a lot. So I went back and did it with steam. Had the sun been out, it would have been on the far side of the tracks, on the barn side. So that's going to wrap up this edition of Wednesday Night Slides. The next show is going to be August 17th, 4 weeks from now. I'll be just getting back from Summer Rail. I'm going to sign this off for the YouTubers now. See them on the 17th, and let me stop the recording.